I'm the author of a book called The Atheist Muslim, A Journey from Religion to Reason. The title is an obvious contradiction. It's intentional and obvious. And there are a lot of geniuses that have pointed out to me that, hey, this is a contradiction. They never complained about the movie Back to the Future for some reason. The Atheist Muslim, though, really gets to them. The thing is, there are millions, and that's shown by polling data. There are millions of atheists, agnostics, secularists, free thinkers in the Muslim world, living in Muslim majority countries right now, who have to publicly identify as Muslims. If they speak up against it, if they express their views openly, they'll get disowned by their families, they can get marginalized by their communities, they lose their friends, they can be imprisoned, they can be executed. Atheism is punishable by death in 13 countries around the world, all of which are Muslim majority countries. And the cost of them coming out and publicly speaking their views, right, and shaking off the Muslim label are really, the consequences are very dire. So these are the atheist Muslims. There are a few who've spoken up about it. Like there's Raif Badawi, who's a blogger in Saudi Arabia, a Saudi blogger who started a website called Free Saudi Liberals, and spoke about secularism. They threw him in jail. He's serving a 10-year sentence, and he's been sentenced to 1,000 lashes. Right? He's been separated from his family and his children simply for doing exactly what I do, right? Which is right about secularism and his activism. So there are bloggers in Bangladesh, right, who have been hacked to death in the streets by Islamic fundamentalist lunatics simply for writing what they thought, right? So there probably are more. There are probably many, many more, but they don't want to suffer the same fate. So you're not going to hear from them. We don't hear from them. I have received, if I showed you my inbox, I've received thousands and thousands of emails and messages from atheists, closeted atheists in Egypt, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, all of these countries. And I hear from them all the time. When I was writing the book, they were telling me, can you please say this? Can you make sure you mention this or that? Because I can't say it here. So there are definitely a lot of them. And just to put numbers on it, and these are probably still underrepresented, is there was a Gallup poll recently, a couple of years ago, that showed that Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam, Muhammad, and the Quran, 19% of people identify as non-religious there. 19%. To compare, that same number is 15% in Italy. Right? In Saudi Arabia, 5% of people identified as confirmed atheists. And in the United States, that number is also 5%. So Saudi Arabia has a population of about 20 million people. That's 1 million people in Saudi Arabia who identify as confirmed atheists. Saudi Arabia enjoys, it's really fascinating. Saudi Arabia, if you live there, and I lived there for 12 years, it's basically like the Taliban with a lot of money. They're oil rich. We all want what they have. We've seen Trump bowing to the Saudi king. We saw Obama bowing to the Saudi king. We saw Bush holding hands with King Abdullah and walking down. I mean, these pictures are everywhere. There's sword dancing with them. This is a country where women can't drive. I'll just leave it there. Women cannot drive in this country legally, right? But there is an alliance. Everybody has an alliance with them. They're thought to be the moderates, whereas a lot of the other Middle Eastern countries, most of them are inarguably less religious than Saudi Arabia, overtly, are considered extremists in many ways. So there is a distortion of how these countries are represented in the world just based on how politically important or how strategically important they are to people in the West. And I think a lot of the UN appeasement probably has to do with that as well. Islamophobia is a misnomer. Islamophobia does not make the distinction between legitimate criticism of Islam and anti-Muslim hate or anti-Muslim bigotry. That's a very important distinction. Islam is an idea. It's a set of ideas in a book. Muslims are people. It's an identity. It's a group of human beings. Criticizing ideas moves societies forward. Challenging ideas moves societies forward. Demonizing people rips societies apart. And human beings have rights, ideas don't. The word Islamophobia does not make this distinction. When we say anti-Semitism, we're not saying Judaismophobia, right? We're saying anti-Semitism because bigotry is against people. You can't be bigoted against ideas. And that when it doesn't make that distinction, it's actually a very sinister term because it actually takes the pain of genuine victims of anti-Muslim bigotry and exploits that for the political purpose of stifling criticism of Islam. Do Islamic fundamentalists use the term Islamophobia? They don't just use it, they love that term because they can exploit it to censor people. They can say that if you have any kind of criticism against Islam, you're being bigoted against us. They'll even say you're being racist against us, right? Which doesn't make sense because Islam is not a race. Nobody's born pre-circumcised. Nobody's born with a hijab on their head. I mean, this is not, you can convert in and out of Islam. You can't convert in and out of a race. But the word Islamophobia gives them a chance to make racism and genuine criticism of Islam and ideology. It gives them an opportunity to conflate the two. One thing that I get a lot from white Western liberals is that they'll read something I wrote. They'll hear a talk that I did and they privately message me. They say, I agree with you. I wish I could say what you just said, but I can't because my family, everybody would call me a racist and they'd call me an Islamophobe, so I can't say it. I'm a white liberal guy. So I'm just really glad that you're saying it. I just spoke to somebody on, a few days ago, Armin and I did an event at the University of Toronto, and somebody came up to me afterwards and they said, well, I really like Sam Harris. And whenever I see something he writes, I just don't share it because then everybody on my friends list is going to pounce on me. But when you do it, when you say the same kind of stuff, I can share it because you come from the Muslim world, so it's okay. It's okay, and then nobody bugs me about it. And that's a problem. That is not just shy white liberals. That is how terrorism works. Okay, so terrorism is not just a bomb blast or people dying or dead bodies. Terrorism is every time a newspaper decides not to print a Charlie Hebdo cartoon, even the day after over a dozen cartoonists there got murdered in the name of Allah. Terrorism is every time you hesitate, from speaking up about what you think, just because you think that you might offend somebody. Terrorism is when you say that I'm not going to criticize Islam because it might radicalize more Muslims and turn them against us. When you say that, you're not curbing terrorism, you've become a victim of it. Get online. Mariam Namazi, who is the founder of the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain, she said that the internet is doing to Islam what the printing press did in the past to Christianity. And that's true. I was an atheist slash agnostic, going back and forth for a very, very long time. I never really talked to anybody about it. I would just troll my family and friends sometimes. But later on, when I found out there were so many others like us, we're having events like the one Armin and I did at the University of Toronto that I'm talking about. That is something that could not be done in the days of Salman Rushdie. Salman Rushdie had to go into hiding for years, and this is just a couple of decades ago, right? And we've come a long way from then. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are more and more people speaking up. There are more people in these countries whose governments just can't censor them anymore. And they're connecting with other people around the world. And this exchange of ideas has essentially gone viral, and I think it's fantastic. And I would tell people who are trying to escape the clutches, or people who are trying to find a voice, or if you're a Western white liberal who has these private thoughts that you don't want to say when you're seeing everything on your TV because you don't want to be called, or what I say is you're Islamophobic. You don't want to be called an Islamophobe. You're too scared of that. Then you reach out. You get online. You'll find people who think like you, and you'll find a platform. You'll find an audience, and that's the only way to change things. You got to fight ideas with ideas, not with walls or bombs.